Political screaming is the new normal. Partisan attacks? Expected. But what you just heard wasn't politics. As usual, it was a direct active threat to the bedrock of this republic. What unfolded today in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania, at a major political rally was one of those moments. We didn't just hear familiar campaign talking points. We heard a set of coordinated messages designed to simultaneously oversimplify our most complex national challenges and normalize an extreme, historically dangerous legal concept. The core issue isn't about mere policy disagreement. It's the calculated interplay between two dangerous strategies: the use of demonstrably false economic claims to generate fear, and, far more chillingly, the introduction of a specific term regarding immigration that, in the legal and historical context, is an unambiguous red flag for the rule of law. When a leader uses a term associated with state-sponsored ethnic cleansing or mass deportations without due process, it sends a tremor through the constitutional framework. If we let this moment pass as just another rally, we miss the critical signal: the increasing willingness of high-level executive power to directly challenge judicial authority and subvert fundamental legal protections for entire communities, all in the service of political expediency. This video is not about who you vote for. I will break down the three primary strategies used in that speech. We will analyze the deep legal and constitutional implications of each claim, showing you exactly how these political statements undermine the stability of the economy and the legal safety of every American citizen. I am Daniel Kershaw, an independent legal and political journalist. I work strictly outside of any party or campaign. My commitment is only to the facts, the Constitution, and a fair analysis of the law, no matter how uncomfortable the truth may be. So, when the highest office in the land uses fear as a political weapon to deliberately distort the economic reality and introduce language that historically justifies extremist actions, what becomes of the constitutional firewall designed to protect all of us? Let's set the stage. The rally took place in a key battleground region amidst a very real backdrop of economic anxiety. Families are worried about inflation, the rising cost of housing, the stability of their jobs, and the seemingly endless political gridlock in Washington. These are legitimate, painful concerns that demand honest answers and nuanced plans. But what we received was something entirely different. The speech was a strategic masterpiece of simplification through scapegoating. Instead of tackling the systemic, global, and multifaceted causes of inflation, which include geopolitical conflicts, the actions of the Federal Reserve, post-pandemic supply chain issues, and international energy markets, the speech distilled the entire economic crisis down to one single, easily digestible culprit: the opposing political party. The strategy here is not to inform, but to enrage. By taking complex issues and reducing them to a simple us versus them narrative, the leader bypasses the need for actual policy debate. He co-opts the genuine pain and anxiety of working-class families and weaponizes it into political division. The structure of the address was built on three foundational high-stakes rhetorical moves. 1. The economic distortion, blaming one party for all price increases and job losses. 2. The emotional fuel, leveraging the language of fear and victimhood. 3. The legal escalation, deploying a term of art, remigration, that elevates the rhetoric beyond politics and into the territory of constitutional crisis. We must understand that this is a deliberate choice. When leaders choose simple slogans over complex solutions, it is because simple slogans generate higher turnout, higher energy, and greater political compliance. But it comes at a profound cost to the national fabric and the integrity of our legal discourse. Now let's analyze the core claims. The statement was unequivocal. Every problem, from rising prices to job losses, is the fault of the opposition. Here is why this is not just political spin, but a dangerous misrepresentation that actively harms the public's ability to demand real solutions. On inflation. As an independent analyst, I have to point out that inflation, particularly the kind the U.S. has been dealing with, is a global phenomenon. It's tied to the global flow of oil, decisions made in Beijing, the war in Ukraine, and the global bond markets. When a president claims that a specific piece of legislation passed by the opposition is the singular cause of all price hikes, he is actively misleading the tax-paying public. The true challenge for leaders is explaining why a policy might have contributed alongside other global forces. By failing to do so, he allows the public to be satisfied with a simplified political attack rather than demanding genuine legislative action that addresses the supply chain, energy costs, or healthcare pricing. This failure to tell the truth about economics leads directly to bad policy because the diagnosis is flawed. On job losses, the claim that millions of jobs are lost solely due to political opponents fundamentally ignores the dynamics of a modern economy. Technology, artificial intelligence, automation, global trade agreements, and even internal corporate restructuring drive job market changes far more than any single political party. When a leader blames only the opposition, he distracts from the vital work of investing in 21st century infrastructure, funding job retraining for affected communities, and addressing the deep-seated issues of wage stagnation and worker power. To weaponize the pain of a displaced worker for political gain while offering a non-solution, blame, is a profound disservice to the American family. The legal escalation, the use of remigration. This is the most critical and alarming part of the entire address. The use of the term remigration in an American political speech must not be treated as a mere gaffe or an unfortunate choice of words. Let's be clear on the legal and historical context. In its modern usage, remigration is not a standard legal or policy term used by the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, or the federal judiciary. It is a term that has gained currency among far-right, nationalist, and white supremacist groups in Europe. It is a concept that goes far beyond standard enforcement or even punitive mass deportations. Remigration implies an effort to fundamentally alter the demographic composition of the country by targeting specific groups for permanent removal, often based on ethnic, religious, or national origin criteria. The constitutional challenge. If a sitting or future president were to attempt to implement a policy framed as remigration, it would immediately trigger a constitutional firestorm. Such a policy would almost certainly violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment if it targeted people based on origin or ethnicity. Furthermore, any effort at mass removal that did not adhere to the rigorous due process requirements of the 5th and 14th Amendments, which require individualized hearings, access to counsel, and clear legal standards, would be struck down by the federal courts. The erosion of legal norms. By uttering this term, the president signals a readiness to operate outside the established norms of the U.S. legal system. He is preparing the ground for an executive branch that may be willing to disregard court orders, procedural safeguards, and fundamental civil rights to pursue a political goal. This is not just a threat to immigrants, it is a direct threat to the independence of the judiciary and the very principle of limited government. This level of rhetoric should send a chill down the spine of anyone who cares about the integrity of our legal institutions. Now let's look at the independent analysis, why it matters to you, the rule of law versus the rule of fear. As an independent legal analyst, I look at the practical consequences. This is not an abstract argument between lawyers in D.C. This is about your life. 1. The economic instability. When a leader relies on lies about inflation and jobs, it prevents you from getting the truth you need to make critical financial decisions. If you believe the problem is simple political sabotage, you will be less inclined to demand long-term structural fixes like housing reform or energy independence. The political rhetoric in this case actually impedes economic stability because it misdirects the public's energy. The leader is essentially asking working families to trade their demand for real solutions for the comfort of having someone to blame. 2. The legal security of your community. Even if you are a native-born citizen with no legal concerns, the threat of remigration creates deep instability in the communities you rely on. Workforce. Immigrant workers, both legal and undocumented, are integrated into every sector of the American economy, from agriculture to healthcare. The threat of mass removal destabilizes the workforce, drives up the cost of labor, which contributes to the very inflation being complained about, and creates massive uncertainty for employers. Fiscal impact. When entire communities are living under a cloud of fear and legal uncertainty, they are less likely to invest, open businesses, or participate fully in the formal economy. This hurts the local tax base and reduces overall economic activity. The language of fear is economically self-defeating. 3. The precedent of disregard. Perhaps the most serious implication is the precedent set for executive power. When a president or candidate shows a willingness to use such extreme rhetoric and challenge the fundamental constitutional protections that govern due process and equal protection, he is eroding the checks and balances that protect all of us. Historical parallel. We have seen this before. Historically, when governments use fear and targeted language to single out entire groups for special punitive treatment, it is a slippery slope. Whether it was the internment of Japanese Americans during WO2, a legal disgrace, or earlier attempts to use immigration law to discriminate, like the Chinese Exclusion Act, the legal system eventually had to fight back to reassert constitutional principles. The fact that this rhetoric is being deployed now suggests we are entering a new cycle of needing to legally relitigate established constitutional law, a tremendous waste of judicial time and resources. This is a 5-alarm fire for the rule of law because it normalizes the idea that the executive branch can act as a sovereign entity, unbound by the courts or the principles of the Constitution, so long as it has the political will. It trades constitutionalism for charisma. The role of the independent analyst is crucial. When the media is caught between reporting the controversial statement and explaining the dense historical legal baggage of a term like remigration, the full weight of the threat often gets lost. My role is to pause the political spectacle and ask the uncomfortable legal questions. Does the president actually have the constitutional authority to implement a policy based on that rhetoric? The answer is a clear no, not without fundamentally shattering the legal system as we know it. The fact that the rhetoric is being used anyway is a sign that the goal is not legal implementation, but political intimidation and the deliberate fragmentation of the electorate. The incident in Pennsylvania is not an isolated event. It is a clear element in a wider, accelerating pattern of executive overreach and political weaponization of legal concepts. The overarching trend we are observing is the political class seeking to dismantle the constraints that the Constitution places on power. They do this by 1. Demeaning the judiciary, attacking judges and court rulings that challenge executive action, suggesting the judicial branch is illegitimate or politically biased. 2. Manufacturing crisis, creating simplified crises, e.g., the economy is collapsing because of them, to justify extraordinary, often unconstitutional, executive action. 3. Using language as a test, deploying terms like remigration to see how much the public and the media will tolerate, thus pushing the Overton window of acceptable political discourse further toward the extreme. This pattern suggests that future political fights will not just be about policy, but about institutional fidelity, whether the executive branch will choose to abide by the rulings of the courts, respect the legal processes of the legislative branch, and honor the core legal protections of its citizens. The stakes are enormous. If this trend continues unchecked, the average American's ability to rely on the courts for protection against arbitrary government power will be severely diminished. The principle of non-delegation, that Congress, not the executive, makes the law, will be undermined. This is the nightmare scenario constitutional lawyers have warned about, the slow, deliberate erosion of checks and balances in favor of unchecked populist executive authority. What we saw at the rally was a leadership that chooses to exploit fear rather than inspire courage, and division rather than unity. It's a choice that trades the promise of stable, honest governance for the thrill of political chaos. Today's rally was a powerful reminder that words are not just noise, they are the architects of our reality, and in the hands of a president they can reshape the legal and social landscape. We must reject the seductive simplicity of political blame and demand honesty about the complexity of the challenges facing us. The choice is fundamentally between a nation that adheres to the rule of law, where every citizen and resident has established rights and due process, and a nation governed by the rule of fear, where the government's power is limited only by its own political will. The integrity of our constitutional republic depends on which path we collectively choose. When a political leader uses historically and legally controversial terms like remigration in the context of economic debate, which concern weighs heavier on you, the potential impact of that policy on the rule of law or the strategic distraction from actual verifiable economic solutions? Share your perspective in the comments below. If you value independent, fact-based legal and political analysis that cuts through the political noise and explains how these high-stakes decisions directly impact your freedoms and your financial security, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening and engaging in this critical conversation.